Am I allowed to guess how expensive the tickets were?
Sure.
Was it over $30,000?
No, under. Galen, come on, man. Come on.
I don't know. You were
I'm
just
not
in
mad at
Vegas in the World Series of Poker. Like maybe somebody threw down a couple Knicks tickets on the table and you were ready to party. Okay, so it was over 15K.
No, under.
No, it was wait.
Yeah.
So I have a really bad perception of how expensive. Tell me where you were sitting.
I had what I think are great seats. So I was in the 200 level, which is there's two big bowls, right? 200 level, second level, but I had like center court, basically just a couple of rows up in the 200s. And we're going to save you. I'm going to save people money out there. Here's the big exploit. The best 200 level seats at Madison Square Garden, which is a great arena, are better than the worst 100 level seats, and they're cheaper.
Hello and welcome to the GD Politics Podcast. I'm Galen Druk. Today's episode is a conversation I had with Nate Silver as part of a Substack Live on Tuesday afternoon. We spent most of the time talking about Graham Platner's candidacy in the Maine Senate race. Nate had some spicy takes, as you will hear. That primary is now completed as of Tuesday night, and with 80% of the expected vote tallied, Graham Platner received 72% of the vote. Although Janet Mills had already dropped out of the race, her name was on the ballot and she received 20% of the vote. Call it a protest vote. Nate and I also discussed the political risk of a quagmire after the United States renewed strikes on Iran in retaliation for a downed Apache helicopter. We also got into why California takes so long to count its votes and whether that actually means the state has a better system. Lastly, we discussed what went into Nate's World Cup forecast model, things like national GDP and total market value of a team's players, and how similar it is to a presidential forecast model. We did also talk about the Knicks, as we both live in New York City. However, I did not include that in today's episode. If you are a basketball fan, you can catch that part of the conversation in the video on gdpolitics.com. All right, we begin with the Graham Platner-Susan Collins matchup in Maine. Graham Platner will win the Maine Democratic primary tonight and will go on to compete against Susan Collins for a Senate seat this fall. Now, of course, there are some edge cases where he could drop out, etc. I think as you discussed in your piece looking at the Maine Senate race, he could drop out by July and the Maine Democratic Party could replace him. There's no indication that anything like that is going to happen. And so we're very likely looking at a matchup between Graham Platner on the Democratic side and Susan Collins on the Republican side. There's a lot to talk about here. You can kind of take your pick, both talking about Susan Collins, talking about Maine itself, talking about the specifics of Graham Platner, how the Democratic Party has reacted to him. Dealer's choice here. Well, I guess I'm the dealer in this case, so not my choice, player's choice. Nate, where do you want to begin?
So I think Graham Platner is a mediocre to bad candidate, and I think that if he cared about the fortunes of the Democratic Party, then he would drop out.
Ooh, okay, spicy take. Why?
Look, Maine is like a D+8 or D+9 state. It's actually become a little bit bluer as you've had a lot of transplants from other parts of the Midwest and the Northeast up to, I love Maine, by the way. I've spent a lot of time there. In fact, my grandma designed a house in Sullivan, Maine, where I'd go every summer. So that's the town that Graham Platner is from.
That both you and Graham Platner have grandparents who worked in design and architecture?
Yeah, but he's salt of the earth.
Your grandmother didn't design windows on the world.
She did not, no.
She could have.
But she was an architect, designed beautiful homes. And but I was inclined to like Graham Platner just because of the Sullivan connection. It's a town of 1,900 people. That's very weird. Who knows? Probably I encountered him at some point without realizing it, or maybe he was a server at a restaurant. There are only 4 or 5 restaurants in Sullivan and Hancock really that are worth trying. So I felt that connection there. But look, it's a D+8, D+7 generic ballot. Maine's a D+7, D+8 state. So the benchmark is that a generic Democrat in Maine should win by 15 or 16 points. It's a blue state in a blue year. Now, granted, Susan Collins has been very formidable throughout her career. She famously won, defeating Sarah Gideon in 2020 in a year where the polls had predicted a Democratic win. I would say a couple of things to that, though. Number one, we have for Democrats, a better political environment than in 2020. 2020 was actually not a terrific political environment. Biden won. They didn't do all that well in like the Senate and gubernatorial races. So this environment is better. Number two, partisan polarization becomes more profound every cycle, which this time around helps Democrats because it means that Maine reverts more to like its natural blue inclination. Three, I think Susan Collins's tricks are wearing a, a little bit thin. I mean, she does take a lot of votes that are anti-Trump votes half the time. But unlike in 2020, where voters they might have assumed that Biden was going to win. Biden did win Maine by a solid margin. So you have a Republican Congress to counterbalance Biden. Here, voters know they're getting 2 more years of Trump, and who knows, maybe 4 more years of a different Republican after that. So there's no check and balance argument. And Collins is also pretty fucking old, which is a problem for Janet Mills. So I think Susan Collins is a very beatable opponent, and previously, the kind of pre-latest round of scandals version of Platner was ahead of her by 6 or 7 points, which seemed pretty reasonable given that she is an incumbent and does have this history. But it was no great feat. This is fucking Maine, not Mississippi or something, or Texas even. Since the most recent round of alleged scandals, the sexting and the accusations by his former campaign manager, and just kind of, frankly, like, what a mess. I'm going to just be honest, man. This guy doesn't seem to have his life together, to be honest. I don't really buy this redemption arc, but he's lost that lead. If you look at polls now, it's basically a toss-up with Collins, and Democrats ought to be doing better than a 50-50 chance in a blue state in a blue year.
Okay, so you made a pretty bold take at the top, which is that for the sake of the Democratic Party, Graham Platner ought to drop out of the race, which would create a situation where the Maine Democratic Party could replace him on the top of the ballot or in the Senate slot. How would that work out? Who would they replace him with?
So there's a gubernatorial primary, and most of the better candidates went into that primary. So whoever finishes second or third, all of them are pretty progressive, right? The election wonk option, the moderate option, will be Jared Golden, who formerly represented the 2nd Congressional District in Maine, which is where Sullivan is in. He has said he's not interested. He bowed out. He was one of the most overperforming congressmen. The kind of textbook case for how like moderation actually does win you this district that Trump had won over and over again. He has said he wouldn't be interested. By the way, there is one more, I've been told this, there is one more backdoor, which is that you could have somebody run as a write-in candidate. In Maine, you have ranked choice voting. So you could run as a write-in without necessarily spoiling Platner if someone wanted to say, okay, I'll take this other Democrat first and then Platner ahead of Collins, or vice versa, or whatever else.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here, which is that, one, a lot of these scandals have just been unearthed. People have been hearing a lot about it. Maybe Graham Platner.
You want to take a bet on whether there's anything more there or not? Like, why are all these people that work for him quitting? Like, that's a very bad signal.
Sure. And I would take the bet that there's more there. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to take the opposite. But American voters have lived through a decade, right, of a, I guess, talented communicator in Donald Trump managing to weather a lot of scandals and political storms. And because of his populist posture, oftentimes the establishment, the media, whatever, attacking him ends up creating this dynamic where it's like, once again, these people don't care about you. They don't care about your economic concerns. They don't care about the little guy. They're just going after me because I want to disrupt the system. Graham Platner is in part picking up that mantle and trying to use it to his own advantage. I kind of assume that he's not going to drop out, that he will extend that dynamic and continue to talk about how, the worst of the accusations are false. I'm also a redeemed person. But really, they're attacking me, the establishment media, the establishment Democratic Party, and all the Republicans because I want to create, Medicare for all and tax the billionaires and all of that stuff. And I'm curious from your perspective, do you think that that approach will not work? Or do you think that, just from a good governance perspective, you think he should drop out?
Well, let me say one thing. Graham Platner is not Trump in the sense that he hasn't proven shit yet. He hasn't. I mean, he'll win his primary tonight, I assume, although their exit polls suggesting he might only get 60% of the vote, which is pretty mediocre when you're running effectively uncontested. He hasn't ever won an election to anything yet. And if you were to win by 1 point over Susan Collins, which, by the way, the race is still a toss-up. Maybe if you gave me free money, maybe I'd still bet on Democrats, right? But probably close to a toss-up. If he wins by 1 point when in a D+8 map in a D+8 state, that still kind of sucks. I think the issue is like, look, I don't know if it's a gay thing or what, but we probably know our share of challenging people. And
Well, that's definitely a gay thing. I think straights are just a piece of cake.
But like, look, one of the nice things, Galen, about being independent is I'm allowed to use like the different parts of my brain. So first of all, there has been a deterioration in the polls. He's gone from +6 to tied. That's extremely meaningful, obviously, anytime you're around the 50-50 mark. But like, I think there are kind of like two typologies. It's like, oh, here's this kind of lovable goofball. He had some PTSD after the war and he's not a perfect person, but now his heart's in the right place and he's recovering, versus somebody who is just chronically narcissistic and manipulative. I believe that Graham Platner is a manipulative narcissist. Now, look, the good thing is that like,
does that make him unique amongst people who have ambitions in politics?
No, I think anybody who enters the, I mean, first of all, a Senate is kind of a fake job, right? Like,
that's the end of today's preview. Head to gdpolitics.com to become a paid subscriber and catch the full episode. We chatted for about an hour, half of which was dedicated to Graham Platner and the Maine Senate race. We talked about how this strategically could play out for Democrats, the calculus that Maine voters are making, and how the progressive left feels about Platner. We also discussed the seeming end to the ceasefire in Iran and the politics of a quagmire, plus whether California is unique for how long it takes to count votes, and we talked about the World Cup. I know this isn't a sports podcast, but Nate built a World Cup forecast model, and it was actually really interesting to hear what went into it and how much of an assist he got from AI. Like I said, head to gdpolitics.com to catch the whole thing for $8 a month or $80 a year. You'll get twice the number of episodes and will help ensure we can keep making this independent podcast. Again, that's gdpolitics.com. I hope to see you there.